My name is Jane Groff, and I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas Parent Information Resource Center, KPIRC. And through a partnership with Greenbush, we are providing 3 webinars for the Literacy in Kansas grant. And this is the first webinar. And we're going to focus on the joining process or family engagement. So thank you for typing in the chat box and participating as you waited. I appreciate that. And I'm going to pull up here a couple of comments that were typed into the chat box. You can see that I typed in a literacy experience that I had at home before I started school was that when we were bored, my mother told us to make books out of Sunday funny papers. So she'd hand us the funny papers, we'd cut them up into their little squares, staple them together, and we would have shoe boxes full of books, we called them, and then we would read them. And so we kind of felt like we were bookmakers out of the funny papers. And you can see that Jennifer typed in that she put letters of her name together using refrigerator magnets. The old refrigerator magnets that we all saw or used. And I love, I still love it to this day. I think it's a wonderful thing to do with our children. So we can see that our experiences were varied. Let me make sure that you can see my screen because I want to move forward here. And let's see. It's not letting me move forward. Let me try down here. All right, so hopefully you can see this slide that says literacy experiences. And from what you typed into the chat boxes, we talked about a couple of experiences. And while our experiences vary widely, each person has a strong memory of early literacy experiences. Mine is over 50 years old that I can remember that. Jennifer's is not that old. But our memories in most cases are linked to interactions with family members. So this demonstrates the importance of family support in this area of literacy. Many of our earliest memories are tied to a person. Mine are tied to my mother saying, if you're bored, here are the funny pages, go make books. And Jennifer's was sitting in the kitchen on the refrigerator playing with the magnets that somebody put there, and it was probably a family member for her. So today we're going to talk more deeply about engaging families in the joining process, we call it. Whether today we're focusing on family literacy, but no matter the efforts that we're using to engage families, the focus for this webinar is on family literacy and how we can join families in this process. So, as I mentioned, I'm the director of the Kansas Parent Information Resource Center, KPIRC. And we are a project of TASN, the Technical Assistance Systems Network, which belongs to the Kansas State Department of Education. So TASN provides technical assistance across the entire state of Kansas to districts and schools. So KPIRC, or my work, in a nutshell, is to build the capacity of educators across the state in the area of family engagement, how to engage families in their children's learning. So the objectives of this webinar, we'll look at 4 of them. The first one is on strategies, that you will be able to identify 2 practical strategies by the end of this webinar for family literacy. In the research department, you'll identify 3 benefits of family literacy. In the joining process, you will identify 3 parts in the joining process, and you will learn about the family engagement standards, and you'll be able to name 3 of those standards. So speaking of the standards, these are the PTA National Standards for Family School Partnerships. They were endorsed by our State Board of Education in 2008, so that you can know they've been with us for a little while here, but many, many people are still unaware of them. So you can see there are 6 of them, and I'll read them out loud just in case someone is on the phone. You never know. Welcoming all families is standard 1, communicating effectively, standard 2, supporting student success, standard 3, speaking up for every child, standard 4, sharing power, standard 5, and collaborating with the community, standard 6. As I look at these standards, and I think about the LiNK grant, the Literacy in Kansas grant, not only would I encourage you to each strategy that you're implementing to engage families in the LiNK grant or in family literacy, I would identify with that strategy which standard aligns with it. So for example, collaborating with the community, standard 6. If you as a district or school are working with your local library on an event or a strategy or a library card promotion, then that would definitely link with standard 6, collaborating with the community. Or in standard 3, supporting student success, if you happen to host a family literacy event, then at that event, when you equip families to go home and practice with their children or play a game with their children, you are helping those families support their children's success. So that would fit nicely with standard 3. And finally, standard 2, communicating effectively. I believe that as LiNK grant recipients, it would be a great idea to let your community know, your families know that you've received this grant opportunity and how it is a benefit to them, what your goal might be, what your mission might be, so that they are aware of the LiNK grant and realize the good work that you're doing with them for their children and with them. So November is Family Literacy Month. And since this is being recorded on November 30th, you may say, oh my, there's no time left for us to participate in Family Literacy Month. But that's okay. I put that on there so that you would know there is a national movement, so that if next November you want to participate in an all-month Family Literacy Month, November's the month to join the national movement. But what I believe is that districts and schools as LiNK participants can do the comment below every day. Parents can involve their children in effective reading strategies every day of the year to equip them with the tools for literacy success. So we might have missed Family Literacy Month this year, but I believe that as LiNK participants, you will be able to engage families in these reading strategies every day of the year so that they can support their children and have tools for literacy success. But I am going to give you a couple of gifts because I felt bad that this was at the end of the month. So the first gift is I want you to see what one school in Virginia did for November Family Literacy Month. They did one school, one book. And the book is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So the entire school focused on one chapter book for 3 to 4 week period. They held a big kickoff assembly and kicked it off and gave families each the book, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and they also had a culminating activity at the end. Throughout the school day, they implemented an entrepreneurship unit, and they created a new candy. They had a chocolate maker also come into the school and talk about making chocolate. And then they ended with a movie screening of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory with families so that they could compare the movie and the book. So they watched the movie together as students and families and then discussed the similarities and differences. So I really like this idea of one school, one book. Then I wanted to share with you in November a strategy that I utilized with families for November Family Literacy Month. And it is using children's books to support social emotional character development. So I'm going to give you a second to read those 3 bullets. So you can see that children can learn social emotional character development, or SECD skills, through children's books. So the 2 books that are pictured here, My Happy Day and The Day I Felt Sad, are very clearly books that talk about social emotional character development kind of skills. It's real clear. It's in their titles. You can see it in the pictures. So I had some books like this and passed them out to the families, to a table. And the family member that was comfortable reading out loud read it to the rest of the family. At the end, there is a page that talks about the social emotional skill. Ask their children's question, gives them ideas to talk about. And so that was the first round, was using a very clear social emotional character development book. So then after this was done, then I went and picked up just your normal books. One of the books was called Spoon. One was called Good Night. Really just almost any kind of children's book. So I passed 2 out to a table. The person that was comfortable reading out loud read it to part of the table members. And in this book, they all had to find the social emotional character development skill that was being talked about. And it was one of the most enjoyable activities I think I've ever done with families. First of all, it was wonderful seeing them read aloud to one another children's books. And then to hear them discuss and say, I think this one talked about jealousy, or I think this one talked about being content with who you are. And then each book was reported on, and we just had a wonderful discussion. So that's the activity that I did with families during November Family Literacy Month. Now, I'm talking about books a lot, of course, because it's family literacy we're talking about here. So really, this is my 3rd gift, and it is this website, www.firstbook.org. This website hosts a book bank that receives books by the carton. So publishers will donate cartons of books to the book bank at First Book. Then schools or districts can go to this site, can register their school, and it will ask you, just so you're prepared, about the number of students that are free and reduced lunch, and you just enter a percentage. It doesn't have to be exact, but a percentage that you serve. And then you're registered, and they will let you know that you've been accepted. And then you're able to buy books from the book bank by the carton. So the books are free. The only thing that you pay is 45 cents per book for shipping. So you may get a carton of books, 30 books for $10, or 60 books for $15 or whatever. So maybe with title funds, LiNK funds, I just wanted you to be aware of a place to get some really reasonable books. So I'm going to click on this website, and we will see that you can, I want to be sure that you can see it. Okay, I think I'm sharing it with you all. So if you look at the top of the screen, you will see a blue band up there that says looking for books and resources, First Book Marketplace, First Book National Book Bank, and become a member. So you can click on become a member and you'll type in your information. But what I want you to see is on First Book National Book Bank. If you click on that, it takes you to the book bank homepage. And the way you know that is as you scroll down and see books, it will tell you a carton of 24 books, carton of 20 books, carton of 12. You can look to the left and you can choose your ages. So if you want ages 7 to 9, let's go look at those carton of books. Carton of 48 books, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, carton of 40, Proverbs for Young People, A Day in the Life of Marlon Brando, Frozen, and on and on and on. I think this has 4 pages for that age level. So, and then you can just keep going. You can click on how much you want to spend, or you can click on the age level, again, over here to the left. So you can click on the amount or the age level. Now, the one thing I want you to see too is up at the top, you saw the book bank. That's books by the carton. If you come to the marketplace, these are severely discounted books. And I have purchased books through here also. And you can see they'll tell you what the book is on retail and what you may pay. So Bears in a Band is a $6.99 book, and you would pay $3.20. So let's look at their new arrivals. So you can see this book was $18, $17.99, and it's $5.60. This one's $4.99, and it's $2.50. Again, you can choose by your age group and also by your price. So the marketplace is one book at a time, and they are really, really well discounted. But the book bank is where you get them by the carton. Okay, so now you know where to go, and that is firstbook.org. So we order from them regularly, and especially if you want to give books, say, to an entire age group or the families of an entire age group, it's a great place to get a carton of books. Okay, so now I want to officially say congratulations for receiving the LiNK grant. I know there are many districts and schools that applied that did not receive it. So, but I'm talking to those of you that did. So congratulations. I think you have the best opportunity through this grant to promote family literacy. So I want to say this is a time we don't want to squander this time. We want to use it to engage families like never before. So sometimes we use the term family literacy and we're really quite unsure what that really means. But we're going to keep it simple because it just describes families and children learning together. We're talking specifically about literacy here. So we're calling it family literacy, but there's some research and now they're thinking of calling it family/home literacy. So you might hear different titles, but we're going to call it family literacy. And it's just when families and children learn together. Now, the important thing to learn, hugely important, is that learning together happens in the home also, and mostly in the home. So when we equip families with the ability to practice a skill with their children at home, to read at home, even provide books for home, that is all part of family literacy. The things that are happening in that home that we've equipped families to do could not be more important. So important. The reason I have Google Doc there is kind of a reminder. There was a preschool in Topeka, Kansas, that wanted to increase family engagement. So they created, I think it was really called like a Google Plus document, where the families could go in and document what they had done with their children that week to engage them in family literacy. It might have been reading to them, it might have been playing a game with them, doing a craft with them. And the family would just go in there and type. We did a family craft. We made books. We practiced writing their names with noodles or in sand or something like that. So then at the end of the month or end of each semester, they had a big celebration celebrating all the engagement that families had done with their families, with their children. So I loved that example. I thought it was, and I was at their celebrations, and those families were awfully, awfully proud of what they had participated in. The other thing the preschool did that is very important is they sent home tips to the families, examples of how to engage. So they sent home ideas like playing a game, making letters out of noodles, or they gave them ideas. And when I interviewed them about that, they said that was tremendously helpful. So as we've looked at some research, in brief, the results show that family literacy programs work. They do work. And that at least 4 groups benefit: children, parents, families as units, and society. So on a big scale or a wide perspective, family literacy programs work and everybody benefits. Everybody benefits. So here was a study that looked at 100 parent participants in family literacy workshops. And I want you to look on the left-hand side. And I want you to read the left-hand side and those bullets to see how children reaped benefits. So we can see that children increased their reading time with parents, their language skills improved, and they just enjoyed books more, and their interest was elevated. Those are 3 skills we want all children to have and to grow in. Now let's look over on the right-hand side so that we can read the bullets and see how parents benefited. So take a few seconds and read those bullets. The bullet that I want to emphasize is the third one, parental efficacy. Because parental efficacy just means that when a parent feels that the skill that they worked on with their children or reading with their children really made a difference, and they saw and they heard from a teacher that it made a difference, their efficacy just explodes. They feel so confident and they know they matter. What they did with their children mattered. So we want parental efficacy to know and to grow in parents, that they're confident. And we want that 4th bullet where they understand the incredible role that they play in their children's education. So family literacy workshops are really beneficial. And we just looked at some of the benefits for the children and the parents. So we always have to ask that question, why is family literacy important? We have to get at the why. Because even in 2018, illiteracy is still a huge problem. 44 million adults are unable to read a simple story to their children. That is not okay. We want every family member to be able to read a simple story to their children. 60% of kids in low-income areas are growing up without any children's books in their homes. These are called book deserts. It can be a rural area or it can be an inner city area. When in the area around that home, there may not be a library, there's not access to books, or sometimes the best books that they have access to might be the local Dollar General store. There just isn't a lot of access for these families to books, and they're called book deserts. Yet 79% of educators believe family engagement and literacy education is essential. So almost 80% of us as educators, we know family engagement in literacy is essential. So it is our job as educators to empower parents to help their children become successful, independent readers. I think if I could create a mission statement or a vision statement for the LiNK grant in this area of family literacy, it could very easily be this. We want our parents to be empowered so that their children become successful, independent readers. So this is Dr. Karen Mapp. I'd like to introduce her to you. She is a leading researcher of family engagement in this nation. So you can see that at the bottom of that wording, her latest book is listed there, Powerful Partnerships, A Teacher's Guide to Engaging Families for Student Success. It's a wonderful book. It's an awesome book. It has links to videos and research. But today, I want to take 2 minutes to listen to her on a video because this is her title for us. She has advice for educators on family and community engagement strategies. So in 2 minutes, she gives her top 3 pieces of advice on family and community engagement strategies. So I'm going to click on the video and share that with you. I'm going to make it full screen.
So my 3 tips for educators would be, 1, that when you are trying to improve your practice when it comes to family engagement, that you have to really examine your core beliefs about your families. How do you see the families in the community? Do you look at them through a deficit lens that perhaps you don't see that they have strengths, or do you look at them as assets, people who have knowledge and skills that you really need to be an effective educator? The second tip, it would be that change the communication from being about negative news or bad news to positive news. And so I always say to teachers especially, make those first phone calls home, especially at the beginning of the year, about positive information, or text things about what the child is doing that's good. A lot of families tell me that the only time they hear from the school is with when it's bad news. And then I think the third piece would be to really think about making those communications about academics and not about discipline. So it sort of goes with number 2, but more specifically, when you're talking to families, let them know what their children should know and be able to do. Families really want to know that information. They don't want to just know that Johnny's been a good boy or that Susie, is nice, because a lot of my families say that's the kind of feedback we get, well, your child is nice. They want to know, what should they know and be able to do at in October and in January and June, and they want to help you get there. So I would say that those would be the three things, the three tidbits that I'd like to share with educators of how they can do something different with their families.
All right. So I forgot to tell you that Dr. Mapp is a professor at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. So education is her world, and her research is specifically in family engagement. So she summarized for us 3 points as educators, and it was examine our core beliefs. Do we approach families with an asset-based or deficit-based approach? And it's easy. Once we've been maybe questioned or confronted by a family member, to kind of distance ourselves from a family. But we as professionals have to work through that and find the assets with that family and communicate even more with them. She said we need to provide positive communication, much, much more than negative communication. I was talking with a school district in Kansas just last week, and they have to log, they're asked by their principal to log their interactions with the families. And because they want to look at how much positive and how much negative communication is going on. And then the focus on academics, linking it to learning, excuse me, is so important. Because sometimes we'll talk about the school fundraiser, the class party, but we're not talking about their child's learning. Pardon me. And so we want to link to learning as often as we can. Dr. Mapp also invented the joining process. She visits thousands of schools a year. And as she did so, she would see some schools that were excellent at partnering with families and some not so good at partnering with families. So she, through her research and visiting schools, noticed that in the schools that were partnering well, she saw 3 components happening. They were welcoming the families, they were honoring the families, and they were connecting with the families. So we're going to look at each of those 3 components and what her thoughts are that she saw from her research on each component. So in step 1, welcoming, what she saw in the schools and what she heard said and demonstrated to the families was this idea of you are part of the team. You're not an add-on. We will not speak only with you, only at parent-teacher conferences. You are key to the success of the school, and we cannot do this work without you. So those are things that we can say to families and we can demonstrate to families. Sometimes we assume too much. We assume that families know they're part of the team, that they're key to the success of the school, but they cannot hear that invitation enough. So schools that partnered well, welcomed well. The second step in the joining process is honoring. What she saw in schools that partnered well with families was that the families knew they had skills to contribute to the educational enterprise. So they would tell the families out loud, you have skills that contribute to this educational enterprise, to your children's learning. When you practice this skill with them, when you read to them, when you come to a performance at the school, when you talk about their future with them, those are all contributions to your children's educational enterprise. So they honored families by not saying some of you have skills and some of you don't, but that you all have skills to contribute to your children's learning and the school as a whole, the educational enterprise. So schools that partnered well with families honored the families well. And then finally, the third step in the joining process is connecting. There's a lot of things we can connect with families over. We can connect with them over the sports, over our fundraisers, over the party coming up. There's a lot of things we can connect with them and can and should. But the main thing we need to connect about is their children and their learning. So we can make decisions together about curriculum and instruction. We can get opinions from families. We can get ideas from families. And I think the new LiNK grant might give an opportunity for that. So that as you're informing and connecting with families over the LiNK grant, and as you let them know this opportunity, you could use it as a time to gather their thoughts in focus groups. There's a lot of different ways that you can make decisions together, but we have to decide that's something we want to do. So schools that partnered well with families also connected well over the main issue, their children and their children's learning. So no matter what your approach is to family literacy, these are the three components that need to be in place. Whether you're holding an all-school family literacy night, whether a classroom by classroom holds a family literacy night or grade level, or home visits, or you're sending resource packets home on literacy to families, no matter what the strategy is, someone needs to remember and remind all those involved of these three components in the joining process. How are we going to welcome the families? Who's going to be at the door? Do we know their names? How are we going to honor them? I've seen at schools that offer food at an event, the teachers behind the counter, and they're serving the families. And I think that's an incredible way to honor families. And then to connect. Try to keep discussions often about their child and their learning. So now we're going to switch a little bit. On our KPERC website, which will be featured again on the last slide, there is this resource called Technology Tools to Enhance School-Home Communication. So there's 3 technology tools on the front and 3 on the back that teachers can use to communicate with families and with students also. I'm going to talk about just the first 2 right now, and then we're going to watch a 1-minute video on the second one. But many schools now are using Remind, and you can see that it is free and that it can be used to communicate with parents. And it is via text messages. You can send any kind of message that if they have a text message capable mobile phone. So what some schools have done is maybe twice a month or once a month or weekly, they may send a text out to their families with a family literacy tip or motivation to read to their children. Even if it was done once a week during the school year, I mean, we're really talking 30, 35 tips, not all that many. There is a website called Ready Rosie, and they do this text messaging with a 2-minute video on literacy practices. Now, Ready Rosie costs. There's a cost with it. And it has a 2-minute video that comes out, and I can't remember if it's weekly or twice a week. So, for example, I watched one where the parent and child pulled 4 items out of the pantry. They talked about them together. They described them together. Then the parent said, now close your eyes, and I'm going to describe one of these items. So she described that it was in a box, it was little small pieces, it began with a certain letter, and then she had her child open his eyes, and he guessed that it was the box of quinoa, and he was right. So really practical ideas of what they can do at home with normal, everyday things in the house. So that's Ready Rosie. But I love Remind. Even though you can't do a video with this, you could send out a tip a week about family literacy and really make it a priority in families' lives because they're hearing it regularly. So the next one is called Seesaw, and you can see it's free. And at the top, it says it is used to share student work. So students can showcase their work that they're doing in the classroom in a portfolio. So the teachers can take a photo of it, or the parents can, or a video of it, and the student can write some comments or video some comments, post it to Seesaw, and then parents automatically get the work that they've done. So they may be working at their job during the day, and all of a sudden they see their child just posted his writing of a paragraph into Seesaw, and they get to connect with their children's learning right there. So when they go home that night, there's something they can say, I saw that paragraph you put in Seesaw. That was really good writing, you know. So we can use technology to enhance school-home communication. So I want you to see and hear from 2 teachers in Sabetha, Kansas, who use Seesaw to communicate with families. I'm just going to show you the first minute, but after that, when you receive these slides, you can watch and they'll talk to you about how they teach you how to get into Seesaw. So I'm going to click on this website. And we'll listen for 2 minutes here to Yolana and Leisha from Sabetha.
Seesaw and technology in general have really benefited my classroom. It's completely changed the way that I teach. No longer is my classroom simply paper pencil. It's much more engaging. When students can manipulate things on their desktop and videotape it real time, send it home to mom and dad, it just opens up a lot more communication between teacher and student. When I leave feedback, student and parent, when they go home, they have something to converse about.
I found Seesaw to be very beneficial in my classroom. It keeps parents connected. Parents that want to come into the classroom but may, for some reason, not be able to be involved, keeps them involved.
So, as I said, once you get this PowerPoint, you can watch. It's just 5 minutes, and they walk you through how to register for Seesaw and give you tips about how to use it with your families. So technology is really more effective when we've used it together, and families use it together. So when we're using it with families, when families are using it with their children, that is when technology is most effective. There's some tips about using technology that we need to be aware of. We need to focus on one or two types of technology to communicate with families. We're hearing more and more schools are using technology, and families are becoming a little bit confused over, did that come on Remind? Was it in Seesaw? Where do I go? What do I look at? Or Power School? And so we don't want to use too many types of technology. So if someone is experienced in the technology, they can teach the rest of the staff. For example, at Sabetha, Kansas, those two teachers are certainly experienced with Seesaw. The entire school or elementary school could use Seesaw, and they could train the rest of the educators so that everybody's communicating in a similar fashion. And families are busy, so many of them love communicating through technology. And there are families that have grown up now only using or mostly using technology. And that is what they would prefer. I think I recently saw that 98% of parents, when surveyed, said that text messaging was their favorite form of communication. So let's summarize and look at our objectives and see if we accomplish these things. So under strategies, we said that we could identify 2 practical strategies for family literacy. We talked about strategies such as a whole school family literacy night, a classroom or grade level family literacy night, home visits, parent packets, literacy packets. And then you also saw at least 2 strategies, the One Book, One School event that happened for Family Literacy Night, and then the one that I shared on social emotional character development through children's books. That was another strategy that we could use. Under research, we said that participants will identify 3 benefits of family literacy, at least 3. We learned that children's interest and enjoyment of books increased when there were family literacy programs in place. We also learned that their language development advanced. And we learned that parents also benefited. Their parental efficacy grew, they became confident, and they knew how important it was that they be involved in their child's learning. We talked about the family engagement standards, all 6 of them, but we talked about 3 in particular. We talked about communicating with families, supporting student success, and collaborating with the community. And then finally, the joining process we learned about from Dr. Karen Mapp, and the 3 parts that she saw happening in schools and created the joining process were the welcoming, honoring, and connecting. Those practices made for great partnerships. So now you've heard lots of information, and as you were thinking or taking notes, I know that you are planning for what's ahead for your next steps in your LiNK grant. So as you meet with your coaches and the rest of the staff that's involved, you can talk about what your next steps are. And you should also know that as KPERC finishes these 3 webinars, this is the first one, after that we will be getting in touch with each LiNK grant recipient to find out what more we can do for you, how we can support you further. So we'll be in touch with you on that. So finally, here is my contact information and then our website information. And on our website, there is a button called Resources, and you can look through all of our free resources and see if they may benefit you in some manner. I know that one school has requested some resources for their families as they're doing their family literacy strategy. So I want to thank you for joining me today. And if you have any questions, you've got my email, you've got our website, but feel free to contact me and we can talk even more in depth. But I would encourage you to also listen to all 3 webinars. I know that Monica from Greenbush has been sending out updates with times and titles. So have a good webinar next week. And thank you for joining me today.